Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. We're going to get started. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Shauna Keystone. I am the current president of the Wolfe Island Historical Society, and I'd like to welcome you for coming today. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you're new to this church, washrooms are right here. If you have a cell phone, if you could please put it on silent or vibrate, that would be appreciated. And we have refreshments off to the side, so please help yourself to some water, tea, coffee, and there's cookies there too. So help yourself. This afternoon we have a special speaker, and I'm going to pass it off to Brian to introduce him. But I will let you know about our next speaker for next month. Next month on Sunday, July 21st, we will be having Eric Gagnon come and speak with us. For those of you who don't know who Eric is, he is very much a big contributor to Vintage Kingston on Facebook. If you follow that, if you're on social media, big contributor. And so he puts a lot of postings on there of past history of downtown Kingston, the industrial area in downtown Kingston. I believe he is also the individual, he has a big blog as well, who has a blog within his basement of downtown Kingston and surrounding area that is quite amazing. I've seen pictures of it and that. So he's going to be coming and speaking particularly about the waterfront over the eras and the information that he has gathered from when he was doing research for his books called Smoke on the Waterfront and Stories of the Waterfront. So anyways, he will be coming Sunday, July 21st, and it'll be 1:30 here at the church hall. So if you're available, please come. We'd love to see you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon.
Maybe I will use that.
Okay.
My brain was okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I am more than happy to see such a fantastic tournament. Today, if you're following Facebook or Instagram and those new kind of things, which are new to me, you've seen the best pictures, I think, you can see of our brand new Wolfe Islander 4, Wolfe Islander 3. Too bad we haven't got aerial pictures of the Wolfe Islander 2 and the 1. But Mike promised me he would have done that had he been around. Anyway, how drones are changing the way we view history. Drones allow us to enjoy a unique aerial viewpoint of the traces humans leave behind and that we interpret to derive our history. Today, almost as importantly, they are proving to be increasingly useful as tools for generating the record of our own life and times that future generations will have available to study. We will explore both aspects. I just recently commented that's the best view I've ever seen of the Wolfe Island Canal when Mike did that area with his...
Funny you should say that.
It was the best. I mean, all it has to do, you just need a good leaf blower and it's over. Without listening to my lips any further, I want to introduce good friend, Arrow Snapper Kingston himself, Mike Hill.
Thank you, Brian. Brian didn't mention I'm a past pupil of his. But I'm sure I made a good impression at the time. So, thank you all very much. Thank you to the Historical Society, who've just reminded me I need to redate my membership, for the opportunity to come out and talk to you. I've been flying drones for about 10 years, and there are a number of questions that people have that I hope I may be able to answer this afternoon. But more importantly, I want to show you some of the things that drones are capable of achieving in a Wolfe Island context. So, we talked about the fact that his history is debatable. History is often seen as the past, but of course, to consider the past, somebody needs to have engaged themselves in the present in recording events and recording construction and all the artifacts that go to be the history of the future. So that's what I'm hoping to do today, to introduce you to the idea that those things are possible. There are two issues that always arise when people are talking about drones, and you can see them there. Safety obviously is paramount, privacy is important. So in the case of safety, what you're looking at there is an example of the airspace around Kingston. And you'll see it barely touches Wolfe Island, which is a very good thing because it means that flying here is largely free of constraint. But there's obviously the other aspect. And in Canada, this is no less important. In fact, many people consider it more important. Drone pilots constantly have to be mindful of the sensitivities of those on the ground who might feel threatened or intimidated or otherwise concerned. And it's important that drone pilots always acknowledge that and they take it into consideration whatever they do. So it is worth remembering that the Canadian Charter permits in a recreational concept, all photography and videography to be conducted in public places. If there's no expectation, no reasonable expectation of privacy, then photography and videography are permitted. And in fact, they're enshrined in law. Anyway, we're going to look today at some of the things that future historians will find very interesting. And of course, these 86 turbines on the island are naturally very interesting. And without the drone, the opportunity to record the way that they were constructed, the way that they operate, and the way that they're maintained, not infrequently. Is anybody here involved in the maintenance of the turbines? But you've all encountered the crane on one of the roads, and you've all seen it working, and they're regular visitors. And I've got a couple of good videos on how they do things. But this is the sort of view that the drone can afford you. And I think what I enjoy almost as much as anything else, although it's a great insight into engineering, is the views you get beyond, in the background. And Brian mentioned the canal. I'll disclose that at the finish of this presentation, we're going to look at the canal and take a run along it, which few people have been able to do. I know there are airplanes on the island, and some of you may have had that benefit, but most don't. These generators and cranes are considerable pieces of equipment, and they do require regular service and maintenance, sometimes off-site. So it's not uncommon to see the cranes on the island and to have the opportunity to witness the work. I'm told, by the way, that the work is not as intimidating as you might think because there are lift assists inside the towers. So the guys who go up and down, they may be on a ladder, but there's a degree of positive effect lifting them as they rise, which I think is a good thing because I wouldn't want to be out of breath when I reach the top. Some of the views you get on the island are just spectacular. And of course, operations don't always take place in the spring and summer. The turbines have to work 24 hours a day, 360 days a year, or more in a leap year. And we do get snow on the island. I think you'd all agree. I've got some lovely video coming up from the ferry at Dawson of the snow blowing across the roadway, and the road has disappeared. I'm sure that's not an uncommon sight. And if all goes well, we'll now see a little bit of video. And I think video is what makes things. Now, these are all short clips, but if you're interested, I've got a card that then all of you can take away, and it'll take you straight to my YouTube channel, and there are protracted pieces on the maintenance, the windmills, and other things. So the windmills are one thing. We can set that aside. Here since, I think, 2009, and the contract's up in 2029, which I think just means that TransAlta would move. By the way, I mentioned that video is particularly attractive, to me anyway. But what makes video, I think, and I'm sure if there are any musicians amongst you, you would agree, is the sound. You know, sound, what they call soundscaping nowadays is quite important. You're hearing the construction noise, hearing the wind, the rain, whatever. But the other aspect of the island that is particularly important, and if you live on the north side, less evident, is the fact that it borders the St. Lawrence Seaway. And that means that we do see quite a lot of marine traffic past the island. There are folks I know who are fortunate enough to live on the south side and who see the ships going by all the time, and even more fortunate individuals in the township on Howe. But one example of that is the occasional visit by a Canadian warship. This is the Harry de Wolfe, which was up here last year. And this has more than simply the seaway connection to the island, because there's a resident here whose grandson is serving on the ship. And I met him up at the point, by Horns, and was able to send him some pictures after the event. And in fact, I bumped into him just last week, and I managed to confirm he'd got the pictures, which was important, but his son's doing really well. And in fact, he's on a secondment right now to US Marines. So interesting for a sailor. But they were able, the grandfather and his daughter and the son were all able to see the son on the ship. And again, the background is important and attractive. And then about 10 days later, she was on a port visit to Toronto. She came back on, some of you will remember perhaps, a very foggy day with a little bit of rain. But again, it's important to catch the video. I think she's a pretty good looking ship. And she's one of several of her class that have been built specifically for offshore patrol work, and especially in the Arctic, whereas I think as Canadians we'd all agree preservation of sovereignty is quite important. A lot of people very envious of the resources, and as climate change begins to bite, the opportunity for maritime transit across the Arctic. So the other thing that I think on the island has been very much the focus of attention in recent years, and will certainly be a landmark point in history, is the docks. And all of you, I'm pretty sure, will remember quite well what the old dock used to look like, but here we are. And that's, I say only 2020, but that's now a piece of history. So there was the opportunity to catch a little bit of video there as well. And of course, I believe, Brian, that's the Papoose, as was, which Kevin now owns out in the bay, and about which I've got to speak to him, because as proud as he may be of his Irish heritage, you don't fly an Irish flag over the Canadian one. But I may leave that to one of you to pass on. Now, I think the term saga is an appropriate one. The saga of the new docks has been going on for some time, but two and almost a half year ago, and there's the boat come over, we were in this sort of state. And disappointingly, we've yet to see the new dock open for business. Have any of you managed to tour? Anybody managed to sneak through the wire and have a look at the terminal and things this year? Yeah, I thought there might be. It's, I mean, it's really well appointed, and it's almost entirely ready to go. But I understand there are one or two engineering challenges, just small issues to be resolved. And of course, when we look at marine matters, and I have to say this because Brian taught me well, safety is absolutely paramount. So, we don't take any chances. I say we, the province doesn't take any chances with the safety of the facilities or the vessel. But this, another thing that drones can do is this, which is to produce, and Brian mentioned one of the canal, the rather extraordinary 360-degree panoramas. And once you've taken one, you can animate it like this. So that was 2022, or about that time. And of course, you get these wonderful views of Marysville too, which results in people saying, oh, I see my house, and I didn't realize my neighbor had such a messy yard. or whatever happened to. But then we come on to the present day, and this was taken just about a month ago. The 4 is sitting there, beautiful boat, and great facilities, and you can do the same thing with this. And I think in future, of course, historians will be able to dig these out, and they'll say, oh my gosh, they had quaint technology then, didn't they? They'll be all 3D holograms and everything else, but they'll say, oh, they were coming on. Those people in the 21st century had a clue. So those are the docks, and I'm not going to bore you with video of the dock. All of you see it, I imagine, almost daily. And we all, I think, look forward very much to using it. As attractive as Dawson Point is, and you can see the ospreys as you wait in line, it'd be nice to get back on the dock and have the shops handy. The next thing I want to touch on, and this is close to Brian's heart as well, I know, and there may be other people here, part of the Lighthouse Preservation Trust. Yes, yep, very important landmark on Simcoe, in this case, built in 1833, still a functioning light, and the last lighthouse keeper, I think, only ceased work in 87, is that correct? 1987? So quite an interesting history. And I'm told there are several families on the island who had lighthouse keepers in their ancestry. So there's another view. It's important to note, remember what I said about privacy, this is now private land. The Coast Guard and Parks gave it over to, I'm not sure who. It's a holiday cottage, and the lighthouse obviously is closed, with the exception, I imagine, of the trust, who can perform maintenance and the like. But the drone is no respecter of airspace, and indeed airspace is not owned by any landowner. So there is the opportunity to go and have a look at it. Not the same 7-glass reflector of the early times. Okay. And the lighthouse is a very important landmark and navigation aid. But more important to the community here and visitors to the island is the ferry service. And for many years, Brian was a proud captain on the Wolfe Islander 3. I regret, and I'm sure all of us do, that she's been allowed to get a little tatty, but she's extraordinarily reliable. And I'm constantly surprised and slightly irritated by folks who complain about the ferry service, and it's 10 minutes late, or they had to pick up an ambulance. And you think to yourself, that the old glass half full and glass half empty thing should be borne in mind. This ferry runs 18 hours a day, or thereabouts, 365 days a year. And it is more remarkable that it remains in steadfast service so reliably than that it occasionally misses a beat. And we should bear in mind too that because of delays in introducing the new boat, she is overdue a number of, minor and more major works. So don't be too surprised if occasionally she throws up her props and says, enough. She works in all weathers, in all seasons, and so do the crews. I know that for many decades, the majority of the crew members and the officers came from the island. And that may have been unsustainable, but for whatever reason, there are many others from Kingston and elsewhere now, no less worthy of the odd thank you. They genuinely do their best to maintain a strong service. So, don't be upset with them when somebody parks in the wrong place or balks you as you try to get on or off the boat. She runs a course day and night. And again, the background is almost as exciting as the boat. Tear in the eye. So again, some of you may feel these are a little bit too short, but I would encourage you to go and visit my channel and you'll find many more.
So, can I interrupt?
Yes, of course.
That is just a beautiful video. I mean, I could watch that all day. How do you, like, is it luck, or do you look at the weather before you go up with your drone?
Well, I have to look at the weather, yes, for sure. And if people have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. No, I'll take yours in a moment. I have to look at the weather because the one thing that the majority of drones cannot cope with is rain. The larger ones, mine weighs just under a kilogram, can cope pretty well with wind up to about 30 miles an hour. But otherwise, yes, you look at the sun position, you look at the conditions, you look at what you expect to happen. And you get an awful lot of bad video too.
We just don't see those bad ones.
That's right.
We only see
Oh. Well, there's a very good reason for that. Anybody who's been around film processes will know that the editing room floor is knee deep in things that didn't make the movie. So I mentioned, 365 days a year, and all weathers. And when the Wolfe Islander 3 was brought back, I think this might be a video, yes. When she was brought back in 99, Brian, from the refit, she came with more ice-capable engines and propellers.
Yes, 1999.
I think,
With the new,
yes, with the new,
the new engines and propellers.
Yeah.
The wheelhouse would be another,
yes, that was 2015.
yes.
Sorry, I'm preaching to the master here. Anything I know, I read from you. So this of course was, many of you will recognize it, Elevator Bay, where the poor old Wolfe Islander 4 spent some time. Not as long as she did in Picton, but she is more capable of coping with ice. Besides the fact that as the refit on the Wolfe Islander 3 introduced a deeper set propeller, which takes it further below the ice, and Caterpillar as opposed to Cummins diesel engines. This one has the deeper set propellers, but the same 360 azimuth. So, she's capable, as we've all seen, as she comes into and docks all these boats. She's capable of 360-degree propulsion. And I think there was a beginner on the wheel this morning because we had a couple of dodgem moments coming into Dawson. But she is published as capable of taking care of 90 centimeters of ice, which is an awful lot. I don't think she'd be doing it at the 12 knots that the 3 can make. And then, of course, we come to, I call her the Queen of the Lake. Other people have different terms. But the Wolfe Islander 4. And I mean, she is a beautiful vessel. Yes, there are carping criticisms about there being no elevators and this, that, and the next thing, and there are metal stairways and not everybody will be comfortable. But, you know, she's really extremely well outfitted and very capable when she's provided with the infrastructure upon which she is designed to depend. So, you know, running as a hybrid is not her most efficient mode. And that's ironic because cars, hybrids, I'm told by all the people who own them, are the most efficient method of travel. So, I don't know. But I think she's a really good looking boat. And of course, it's nice that a couple of weeks ago, she got her own ramp back.
Oh, okay.
If you can't read that, it says Amherst Island 2. And no, this isn't a low-flying drone. That was from the ground. Great music, I think, and it's worth a mention here. When you're making sort of recreational videos and so on, YouTube, the biggest platform, actually ban copyrighted music. So all of the music you hear here comes from a service that produces royalty-free, copyright-free music, and it's a remarkable repository. Some of you will be thinking, that's a very odd load for the boat, and they haven't parked them very well. Well, that was the crew from MTO Marine Services coming to make the ramp exchange. Okay, and I still think she's a great looking boat. And I'm going to close all but one piece with a little bit longer tour, Brian, of the Wolfe Island Canal. And the canal, of course, was dug in the last century and was intended to create a service. Brian is a much better source of information on this than I am. To facilitate trade, marine trade between the States and Kingston. And it would considerably shorten the passage. But it is looking a little bit sad, although actually on this occasion, last week, it looked pretty good to me, besides, as Brian says, you know, need of a good grass blower to clear it out. So there's the basic view. And you remember those 360 panoramas, which was what was on Facebook? And you know, I just love those sweeping vistas that we have here in southern Ontario. People can complain about the lack of mountains and rolling hillsides and so on, but it's very pretty countryside. On the island too. And now, the little bit longer view of the canal. This time we'll turn south about. I'm interested in these little ponds. Were these dug for farm animals? Do you think they don't look natural? They're dairy pond.
It's meant to be a trout pond.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Okay.
Is that right, Hank?
And there's another little one there. Shades of Copeland for music fans. And of course, catching a day like this, wonderful. I'm guessing the depth there is probably 4 or 5 feet, if that. Anybody kayaked up there or paddled or?
It was originally 7 or 8 feet.
Yeah, well, yes, you would expect.
There is a rock shelf or whatever in that bay as you go out.
Is there?
Yeah, if you were going to put bigger boats through there, you'd have
Right.
to be careful. Not in the canal area, but just
Yeah,
as you
yeah, in that large bay with the island across the mouth. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm told as well, and I used to dive a lot, but I'm told that there are still barges from the construction of the canal in that bay. Anybody? No? I will make a video on the canal. I went out to 10th Line Road today, and of course it only gets so close, but I mean close enough. And get a little more of the history and talk about it. There have been discussions, I'm led to believe, about reopening it as a recreational facility or whatever. And of course the new canal dock is a lovely little park here on the island. A lot of, most of you will know, but I've only remarked it the last couple of years, there's a heron that flies across the south end of the new dock park almost daily, 2 or 3 times. And in fact, this morning I was down on the market square, if that's a reasonable term for it, and 2 herons came in and circled, and 2 ospreys, of course. You are so blessed on the island with the wildlife. And the farmers amongst you may not share the same views about the deer, but that's by the by. So those are the pictures and things and what I've got to give this morning. I don't want to overload. The question that sometimes comes up, besides the, how do you choose the subjects and where do you fly and why do you fly, people often ask how controllable are drones? They have concerns about them flying out of control or crashing or whatever. Well, they occasionally do, but it is very occasionally. And if you're all content and Shona brings the lights up, please, I will dig 2 drones out of the boxes and I'll show you them and I'll lash one of them to the computer and lift it off gently. It's mildly noisy but not outrageous. And it's not going to fly at you. And we can take a picture of everybody. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay. All right. And if any of you have questions about owning drones or flying them or becoming accustomed to them, please don't hesitate to ask.
Do you mind if we snap pictures?
Not at all. No, not in the slightest. Oh, and by the way, those regulations I mentioned, and there are 2 posters, enlarged posters at the back, that talk about drone regulation in Canada. And of course, it's important they are regulated. Anything above 250 grams, which is 2 sticks of butter, at takeoff weight, has to be registered, and the pilot has to be certified. This one's about 780 grams. And I maybe should have mentioned, I came to drones from radio control modeling, which a lot of people do. And radio control modeling, for anybody who's ever done it, is considerably more difficult than flying a drone. And if you want to make life really difficult for yourself, then you fly radio-controlled helicopters, which I'm told by people who know are even more difficult to fly than radio-controlled aircraft. So we're just waiting for the controller to go through its checklist and things. There you can see we're getting. Anybody recognize that? Yeah, the Waban crossing. Sorry, I'm going to be in front of you guys because, And there's the nice thing. On the controller, I have the ability to moderate the thing. And you might notice it looks a little bit warm. And that's because we haven't yet set the white balance.
Approached edge of altitude zone.
Oh, listen. It's upset with me.
I don't like this. This looks dangerous, unless you're going to pick it up.
No, I'm going to fly it up. I think.
This?
Anybody have any doubts? Leave now. Okay, so it's now saying, oh, you don't see it up there. It's now saying takeoff permitted. I'm in manual camera mode. They all have the ability to fly in auto mode for pictures or manual. Manual, you've got full control, and photographers amongst you will understand you may want to change the depth of field, produce a blur effect or not. And then we just start the motors.
Takeoff.
And I'm going to put it into what's called cinematic mode, which means it does not respond as quickly. And then we're going to lift off. The beeping you can hear is obstacle avoidance. It has all-round obstacle avoidance. So it's warning me that things are closer than 15 feet. And I'm going to move back just a little bit to give us a little bit more of a view. And up a little bit. And I think you'd all agree that's a pretty good view. So if anybody doesn't want their photograph taken, now's the time to opt out. And we're shooting video, and I'll just sweep it across a little bit to make sure we get everybody. I'll get your model releases afterwards.
So it's more stable than a helicopter because it has 4 blades.
No, that's not the issue. It's more stable because it relies on onboard GPS and gyroscopes to position itself. So it has both gyroscopes and movement sensors, accelerometers. So it copes very well to hold off. I'll just sweep it back.
That's why you don't have any movement and you're moving.
Correct. So we'll just take a couple of pictures. And if everybody's content, oh, I should show you. This drone, and the question of cost always arises. You can start at about $400 for a very reliable drone that will give you great pictures. This one is about 3,000 Canadian, but if you excuse me a second, I'll just show you. This carries 3 cameras. So there's the 3 times camera. And for 35 millimeter photographers amongst you, that's about a 70 mil lens. And we'll leave the ladies alone and we'll go and pester Brian. That's a 155 millimeter. Yeah, and I got him. Good. So that we can hear each other, I'll bring it down. And if you look, at a certain point, I can take my hands off the stick and it's going to land automatically. Now, the other thing to bear in mind, and it's very important, when people have concerns about safety and the like, if the drone, which is constantly sampling its little onboard computers all the time, if it senses that it's too far away to come back on the remaining battery, it will tell you, it will give you the option, which you'd be very imprudent to ignore, to come back automatically, or you can override it. Now, you override it at your peril. There are times, it's a bit like the rule of thirds. Any boaters here will understand. A third out, a third back, and a third in reserve. Because you don't know what the tides, currents, and winds are going to do to you. So you ignore warnings at your peril. It's constantly judging from the nature of the force applied to all the four rotors, where it is, what the wind is doing. When I bring it back, I can interrogate the log afterwards, which is registered in millisecond intervals, and it will tell me what the greatest wind during the flight, the greatest wind encountered was, where it was, and what direction it was. So, they are incredible pieces of computer engineering besides their flight characteristics and their photographic capabilities. So, there's something that I think we're going to see more and more and more of, and they're now developed. They've yet to begin extensive service in Canada, but in the States we're seeing an awful lot of them in the agricultural field, capable of carrying about 25 kilograms of spray or fertilizer, following a predetermined pattern, like today's tractors. When I grew up, a tractor went where the guy with the wheel sent it. Nowadays, you get in, and some of you may enjoy this facility, and you program it, and it's much more accurate. And of course, we've got the National Ploughing Championships coming up before very long in August. Are there any questions? I'll let you look at the drones. Oh, and it's important as well. So this drone I mentioned is about 750 or so grams, under a kilogram. And I will mention something else in a second, but let me just show you. I talked about what they call the micro drones. These are drones under 250 grams. And you can actually pass this one around. Don't pull the props off, but I'll let you pass it around. 2 sticks of butter. So, the thinking in Transport Canada, who are the regulators, and the other regulatory agencies around the world, is that if that falls out of the sky or it flies into you, it's probably not going to do you any significant damage. In the States, if you're flying those near people, then you have to put prop guards on it. And interestingly, they take it over 250 grams and bring you into the licensing and registration category. So, for what it's worth. But both of these, that's not the latest generation. This is, more or less, are capable of 4K video. In fact, 5.3K, which nobody can watch anyway because you don't have televisions or anything else to watch it. The next ones, and we're expecting them this year, will probably do 8K video. Cameras are doing 8K now, quite routinely. So they're incredibly capable. And the sensor in that is no bigger than the sensor in your cell phone. But then those of us who carry smartphones know how very good the photography we can get from those is today. So, quite remarkable.
How long do they last on a charge?
It depends on the drone. That one is listed as 46 minutes, but that's a bit like the fuel economy figures you get from the garage. That's in ideal conditions with a brand new vehicle. I get better than 30 minutes out of a battery on that one now, in windy conditions. And I've had that up in 30 miles an hour of wind, which is 50 Ks.
Well, they showed drones that don't look really much bigger than that being used in Ukraine to drop grenades.
Yep. Well, you take us into an interesting area because, yes, they're using a lot of drones like this, camera drones, and drones can really, in many respects, be described best as flying cameras. That's what the majority of people use them to do. In Ukraine, they're using what are called first-person view drones, FPV, you've probably seen in the news. FPV just means you're wearing goggles to see what the drone sees. So that's why they're able to fly them very accurately and directly into the bustle of tanks and so on. They weigh about the same as that one, and they can carry a grenade too, an anti-tank grenade. So we will go quiet for this piece because I'm just relieved that with everybody watching those things from Ukraine, nobody started to say, we should actually tighten up on drones and people should not be allowed to have them. I was in Washington, D.C. just after 9/11, and I was diving at the time, and I worked for a dive store down there in Virginia. And the FBI came round to all the dive stores and said, we want to know all the people who have trained on rebreather dive sets, in the last 5 years. And of course, what they were thinking of was the fact that some of the people who were flying the planes on 9/11 had taken pilot training in the States. And people afterwards said, it was very odd, he never really seemed to be interested in landing, he was only interested in taking off and flying. Okay, and in the same vein, the FBI and others, the counter-terrorist people, became very concerned about divers using rebreathers who make no bubbles, but who can go under a ship, for example. And has anybody taken a cruise in the Caribbean recently? Yep. You might not have been aware of it, but on every second or third port, divers go under those ships and check the hulls. And they have spaces, water intakes and other features in the hull of the vessel, that recede. They're always checked for devices and interference. But it's a big concern. Some of us are old enough to remember the Achille Lauro and the hijacking of that by the PLO. Long time ago. Ancient history. So are there any other questions?
Well, so there's drones used probably on a weekly basis to get the
Mine?
things into prisons in Kingston.
Oh yes. I wondered if anybody would bring that up.
Regulations about not to you can't go too close to that. But you can't really use it in Kingston much either, like by law, right? That's what you were saying earlier.
I can. On your way out, if you're interested, have a look at the posters. Kingston, 5 nautical miles out from the airport. Nautical miles and aviation is a funny old science. They still work in nautical miles for all the calculations. And there's a very good reason for it. Does anybody know, besides Brian, does anybody know what it is?
It's a lingua franca.
Yes, but for a good reason, for a good practical reason. A nautical mile is 1 minute of longitude, okay? Whereas a statute mile is not. So nautical miles make sense in aviation. 5 nautical miles around the center of the airport in Kingston, you need to be flying either a little drone, what they call a micro drone, or have an advanced certificate. The advanced certificate is, it requires you to complete a second examination. Most people have to do a basic exam, which is, I think, 30 questions in an hour and a half. The advanced exam is 50 questions in 60 minutes. They're both open book, but the advanced is definitely more challenging. And it's a pass mark of 80% as opposed to 65%. In addition, you have to undertake an in-person flight review, which demonstrates that you're both capable of flying the drone capably and safely, and you understand all the emergency procedures if you lose link or the drone flies away. And in actual fact, if you buy a drone from a reputable manufacturer, they really can't fly away, because if they lose the radio link, they just fly back to where they started. Or hover, or land. And you have the choice before you send it off. Okay?
Who's the certifying authority?
Transport Canada. For drone licensing, it's just an aircraft. It's just another aircraft. But anybody who's flown will know that there's a hierarchy of priority. You know, for example, balloons get right of way over gliders, get right of way over powered aircraft, and so on. Well, drones are down there at the bottom, for very good reason. I can, as you I hope noticed, I can control the altitude, direction, and heading of that drone to almost millimeters. I'd like to see somebody in a little Cessna do the same. You know, I've flown little aircraft, and you know, maintaining 100 feet of altitude is challenging at times. Yeah, Transport Canada. Now, Transport Canada are the regulator, and they make the laws. Well, the government makes the laws. Transport Canada propose them. NAV Canada, which is a private company, manages them. So it's Transport Canada who determine what you need to do, and NAV Canada, the flight service station in Kingston, to whom you talk, but who do not control aircraft. You might think every time you visit the Kingston airport that there's a control tower. It's not, it's a flight service station, because they cannot tell you what to do. They can advise you on how you should deal with a particular issue. And listening to their advice is important, because one of the funny things about Kingston and the north-south runway is that it's on a hill. And if two pilots on a nice day, with no regard for the wind direction, decide to take off from opposite ends, they're going to have a nasty coming together in the middle. So, you know, that's actually a pilot note in what they call the Canada Flight Supplement. So Kingston is interesting. It's always worth listening to the flight service specialists, because they've got a lot of experience, and they're generally telling you what you need to do. It is an imprudent individual who ignores them. And you do occasionally see it. Anything else? NAV Canada, and I have to say this, it's indelicate, but I will. Transport Canada were completely taken by surprise, I think, as almost everybody was, by the surge in popularity and availability of drones. You know, the first recreational drone only appeared on the market in 2013, a little over 10 years ago. It was bulky, solid, didn't fold like these do. And you put a GoPro camera, an action camera underneath it to take pictures. And they specifically warned you, do not use the remote control for your GoPro, because it may interfere with the drone control. So, you know, you set your GoPro going, you pointed it in roughly the direction you thought you wanted, and when it came back, you saw whether you'd got it, and whether you'd remember to turn it on. A complete world of difference from these. One thing that they did do in those early, and I had one, a Phantom 1, they had an interesting mode whereby in whatever direction the drone was facing, when you pushed the stick to go forward, it would come back towards you. Oh, sorry, it would go away from you. So, you know, there was no confusion about which way it was heading. If you wanted to come back, you pulled the stick back, and if you wanted to go away, you pushed it forward. And for some reason, that's disappeared. Probably as people became more familiar with the controls. I'm in danger of going over time.
No.
Anything else?
We're here all afternoon.
If everybody's content, I'll post those pictures, and Brian or Shauna can put them on the Historical Society site. And if I didn't mention it before, there are no regulations about flying indoors. Because otherwise, you have to be a certain distance from individuals, and you can't fly overhead and so on. Which is, I think, reasonable. I wouldn't want that falling on me. And anybody who's been around electric motors will know you don't try and stop an electric motor with a blade.
You said you get about 30 minutes of time?
Yeah.
What is that in distance?
Sorry?
What is that in distance? How far out can you
How
come?
far you go?
Oh, well, this has a speed of 46 miles an hour. So about, what's 46? 50 is 80, so about 75 kilometers an hour. Yeah.
What's the range for your remote?
The published range is 15 kilometers. And now it's, sorry?
Then you can't see it.
No, and you make a very important point. In Canada, and I'm glad you reminded me to mention this, without special authority, you are restricted to 400 feet. And the reason for that is that manned aircraft, except for the purposes of landing or taking off or special conditions, have to stay 500 feet above populated areas. So they like 100 feet separation, and so do I. You know, I don't think that would come off well. So that's one condition. You're supposed to be, I say you're supposed to, no, you have to maintain visual line of sight. Unaided visual line of sight. You can use spectacles, but you cannot use binoculars or a telescope or whatever. And in the UK and in the States, they interpret that even more strictly, although there aren't many people who go out and check. And that's not the right attitude, I understand. But they interpret visual line of sight as meaning that you are aware of the direction in which the drone is pointing at all times and can see clearly enough to be certain of that. So that's about 100 meters, especially with a little one.
So it has a range of, let's say, 15 kilometers.
Kilometers,
miles,
yep, kilometers.
So does that mean, and you're, you would have to be going the same direction as they are
Yes,
to maintain
yes.
that on a motorcycle or something.
Yes, and there's another thing. It's not illegal to fly a drone from a car or a boat,
Yeah.
but you can't be driving at the same time.
No.
It's the same as the water skiing and so on. Yeah, you can't drive and manage the water skier. So I started saying Transport Canada were probably very surprised by the surge in drone popularity, which is the reason why in 2019 they introduced the regulations. And I'll get to the point. The point I want to make is that they had, no more than anybody else, experience of how drones work, how reliable they are, and what to expect. So they drew on, understandably, the experience of the manned aviation community, who all went, no, not in our airspace, So we got a lot of very odd regulations that were not strictly applicable. And in addition to that, and I belong to an organization representing drone pilots that campaigns for rational thinking. When they had to devise the examinations, it's no surprise to learn that they went to pilots and said, what sort of questions should we ask? So drone pilots were being asked questions on things like hypoxia, which makes as much sense as asking a mariner, to know all about hypoxia. Except, if you go down the Halon environment or something, it would be relevant, but not very relevant to a drone pilot. So, all right, I've rambled on enough. Unless there are questions. But please feel free to have a look at the drones and at the posters. It's important people understand that they are not particularly threatening. That said, you've all seen what a 7x camera can show you. I would just say it's not an unreasonable fear if you're sunbathing in the backyard, au naturel, and you hear a drone, to be concerned. Okay? 5 years ago, wouldn't have been a problem because all they'd see is a blur. But today, not so much.
8K.
Well, yeah.
Can you hear them at 400 feet? Right? I don't. Would I hear that at 400 feet above me?
No, probably not. But it's interesting. there are quite a number of models nowadays. Some are noisier than others. Interestingly enough, the bigger the drone, and I mentioned there are some agricultural drones now, there are firefighting drones that actually lift a hose and can direct water at high apartments and things. But the bigger the drone, the lower the pitch of the propellers, which is considerably less irritating. The little ones tend to be a little buzzy and whiny. Was anybody greatly offended by the sound? No, it's not too bad. But it's, even on a work site, people can hear it 100 feet away, which is a good thing. You might have noticed, if you've seen drones before, they usually come in a sort of neutral grey, dark grey, light grey, whatever. That's a plastic skin. And that's for that very good reason about being able to see it. And from my standpoint, I want people to see it. Because I would prefer, and I always say this if I'm following construction or whatever, I always make a point of trying to meet the people and saying to them, if you find the drone intrusive or distracting, wave me off. I can see you, wave me off, because that's the last thing I want. The reason I follow construction and various other projects is to highlight and showcase the skills and the talents of the craftsmen and women involved. And to document the project, for historical purposes.
When you were taking videos of the Walton crossing, and the ferries and the docks and all that, did you ever hear any opposition to that, like any complaints about it?
I would be lying if I said no, but only in the early days. And the concern was, understandably, people who thought, oh, the bosses have got a drone to watch what we're doing and spy on us. And when it became apparent that that wasn't the reason, and when I reassured them that if the company who managed the third crossing, Kiewit, huge American company, great tradition, employee owned. Did anybody know that?
I worked for 36 years.
Well, great company, isn't it? Yeah. Very safety oriented. I think I'm right in saying it would not be unusual if somebody committed a grave safety infraction to be sent on their way.
Yeah, safety was number one.
Safety is number one.
CEO down.
On the back of all their vests, it says nobody gets hurt. Yeah.
And do I understand that you were one of the ones that identified the problem on the LaSalle Causeway?
I didn't identify it, but I produced pictures of it before anybody else did.
You better take a look at that, or what is it?
No, they knew. On the afternoon of Saturday the 30th of March, they knew. I don't know whether it made a big noise as the beam buckled.
Everybody's letting on that nobody knows how it happened.
Somebody knows how it happened.
Can you tell us what happened?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've heard 2 or 3 theories, and I won't repeat them because I don't think any of them is necessarily authoritative. They range from an actual physical impact with a piece of equipment, which I don't think was the case, to, well, I'll leave it there. we will all know in due course because there is an inquiry. Yeah.
I'd like to mention, I first became aware of Mike's work when I was watching with interest the third crossing being built, and today's topic, the subject is actually what struck me at the time, a great historical record of the logistics involved in moving everything around in the right order. And I think, Mike, you had some good contacts to add to the color commentary that you provided with the video footage.
Yep, thank you for saying that. But Kiewit, job number 1 is safety. The other thing at which they excel is planning and project management. And funnily enough, I was watching one of the videos from a couple of years ago, one of the updates. And one of the things I noticed every day, because I was there most days towards the end, the project engineers, couple on either end, were constantly on the move. up and down the site, inspecting, checking, managing, reviewing, looking at the plans. Surveyor was there almost daily, taking measurements, so on. So, they would not have been surprised days later to find something wrong. They would have detected it and probably prevented it going wrong. And I'll say it, I shouldn't give offense. That's not always the way on a project, on a construction site.
Exactly right.
It's one of the few jobs that was built on time and on schedule,
Yeah,
and a government job.
and under budget.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned when I remarked on the value, I think, of budding civil engineers and budding construction workers to see the documentary footage that you had provided weekly on your YouTube channel. You were saying that you were going to give that to Queens?
It's been suggested to me, and I don't have any heartache about that at all. I don't monetize any of my videos and things, so it's they're very welcome to use it.
And I think more and more we talk about the people coming out with book learning from universities that don't know anything about the practical world. I think what you showed us is a lot of the practical world, logistics, materials, management, that sort of thing. So that's why I suggested that it's a it almost should be perhaps part of engineering school.
Well, thank you for that. But there are two things I would say, and it sounds like I'm a paid spokesman for Kiewit. Kiewit have a scheme, and I'm sure they always did. It's employee owned. Where if you have a good idea about how to do something better, quicker, more safely, and you take it to management, it gets considered and introduced. And there's a cash bonus. Brilliant. Not in your time?
Yeah, we had a stock program, but it's all related. It's
The same focus.
the same focus. Performance stocks.
Yeah, right.
You don't get promoted based on the number of years you're in the seat. It's based on
Yes,
your
yes.
ability to the front line, because it's not only it's owned and operated by its employees. So when you
Right.
retire, you have to sell back your shares. So in that kind of environment, you do the right thing because it's in you have complete alignment between your personal views and the company.
In your own interests.
And all you have to do is set good rules and get out of the way.
Yeah.
And people will do the right thing.
Yeah. Just rewinding very quickly, the business of did people mind initially? One or two people were concerned about they're spying on us, but one of the safety managers was concerned because he thought it was distracting and so on, and he thought that there was little regulation or control of drones. So I offered the project team, who met every Friday. I mean, they met daily, but they met every Friday for a big consideration of the next week's work. A briefing on drones, a little bit like this one, but more focused on the regulation and management. And they took it, and after that, never had any problem. In fact, I made it clear that I was open to this. The engineers would approach me and say, do you happen to have a picture, or could you take a picture of this, that, or the next thing? And in most cases, I had a picture already. But and the same thing to an extent is happening over at the Kingston Centre, where they're building the new Canadian Tire. I'm sending them pictures from time to time, and on occasion they're saying, "Oh, I wish we'd thought of asking for that." Things like a simple top-down view, showing the state of the completion of the roof or the footings or whatever. Yeah, I don't know why there isn't more work done in that way, but documenting projects, yes, I think really important historically, and in particular the Wabon Crossing. I mean that really was it was a flagship enterprise, and the city, a good friend of mine who was co-author on the book we produced on the project. He proposed to this, because he does a lot of commercial photography, construction photography. He proposed to the city beforehand that he be contracted to document the project, and they just weren't interested. And then the city paid another very, very capable drone organization, Skystream, I'm sure all of you have seen their work, to do it. And obviously they were pulled in 100 different directions every day, and they didn't do anything like the coverage we did. But, you know,
Well, they got it done for free, Mike.
there is some of that. Yes?
I would just like to compliment you on the verbiage that you use with your videos. It's always so positive, and it's, you know, in today's world, that is so unusual, and really do enjoy that. Your comments are just as good as your photos.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't see any point in focusing on the negative. You know, for the same reason that I won't show people breaking the rules. You know, where's the benefit for me or for them?
Did you have a card?
I do have a card. In fact, I brought a number. Here we go. Yeah, I'll bring this to you.
Thanks very much.